Welcome to Mental Health Now. My name is Kim McDevitt. I'm the Executive Director of Mental Health America, and today we're talking about student mental health. I'd like to welcome Jenna
Martorana.
Martorana. Jenna is a mental health advocate from Schuykill Valley Elementary School. I understand you're a school counselor there.
Yes.
And welcome also her mother, Cindy Martorana.
Hi.
Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you.
Also probably a mental health advocate as well, right? And Maria McComsey. Welcome, Maria. Maria is a learning support teacher at Columbia Borough School District.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. In 2021, the Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, reported that suicides or attempts were up 51% for adolescent girls and 4% for boys compared to 2019. So 2 years it advanced that high. And that was during the post-pandemic or in the midst of pandemic. So what are you seeing today? Has there been any shift? Have there been any decreases or increases?
Would you like to go first? I believe that a lot of what was brought to light with the mental health conditions during the pandemic and seeing the subsequent suicides from that, I believe those are still very prevalent, and that we still need to be having more resources for these kids to combat this, because the mental illnesses that were developed during the pandemic are not just going to go away on their own. And our society as a whole has changed the way that we communicate, the way we interact with each other because of the pandemic. And those were very important developmental times for our students, that they did not get to develop those social skills with one another. And so
there's a developmental delay.
Yes.
Almost in social.
And I'm seeing what I'm seeing in my students, how they interact with one another, whether that be negatively or how they even interact with staff, because they're not used to that. They've missed those couple years, especially those who are online all the time. And so
formative years, right?
Yes. And so being able to be back in the schools with one another and be able to interact with each other, they're having difficulty doing so. And we're human. Communication and connection is so important to us. And isolation is one of the biggest warning signs for suicide.
Well, in fact, our Surgeon General just came out with a report about loneliness, and so how it's the next epidemic, and that we need to focus on it as much as we focus on tobacco and obesity and some of the other health issues. Jenna, you have a very interesting story, and actually that's how we were introduced to you. You're an author as well, and doing some great work in the mental health space, supporting youth. Can you share a little bit about your story?
Yes, so I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety as a junior in high school, although I can look back now and see where I struggled with anxiety even in elementary school. But because we didn't talk about mental health, we didn't know the warning signs, I went that long period without being diagnosed. And on average, it takes a child from having the onset of symptoms to them actually getting help is 8 to 10 years. And I fit right into that statistic. So I was lucky enough that my Spanish teacher, Senora Simmons, noticed these changes in me and reached out to my mom. So because she noticed, I was able to get the help that I needed to still be here today.
That's very interesting, because youth today, it's very rare that a teacher would notice depression in a student, right? You just think it's, developmentally appropriate to swing, right? To swing in moods and to struggle a little bit. So it was this teacher. And so what was causing your distress at this time? Could you identify?
I was in an abusive relationship, I was getting bullied, I was dealing with friendship issues, problems at home, trying to apply to college and figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So just a lot of pressure on top of issues with relationships that culminated in my mental health taking such a deep dive.
And did you notice anything with Jenna?
We did notice things, like I noticed that she, was like staying in her room a lot and stuff like that. But, when the teacher had called me, She said that I see her walking up from the parking lot and she's perfectly fine, but till I have her first period, I can tell she's been crying. So something's going on.
Yeah.
And she said that, that was the main thing. But she was still doing all the activities that she'd always done. She was in band and color guard and doing all these different things. And to me, it just seemed normal that she kind of, that 14, 15, 16-year-old
Right.
would be going into the room and spending the time by themselves.
And so girls are experiencing a lot more mental health challenges, especially with anxiety. And actually, the PACE data shows that almost 39% felt depressed most days, and 30% were so sad that they stopped doing their usual activities, and 18% seriously considered suicide. So those are alarming statistics.
Alarming, but not surprising, unfortunately.
Right. So it took a special educator to recognize, hey, and to reach out to you, the mother, which is not very typical, right? What can schools be doing to recognize Maria? And
I mean,
what are you
your
doing
teacher,
engage?
I think, is a fine example of teachers building a relationship of trust and knowing that side of the student, that school side, a little bit more. Teachers, I think, really have to be able to look at the whole picture instead of the student sitting in their desk and I have them for 40 minutes and then I've got to kind of move them out. Like you said, the pandemic kind of brought to life this big issue. We have more things, but our kids are dealing with things that generations before us never had to. They have these complex traumas going on and have to sit there and, like when you said, she presented normal. Well, that was one of her coping skills, right? So developing the proper coping skills to get through. Teachers, now you don't just teach math. You teach math and you teach how to cope. You teach how to problem solve, resiliency, because if not, the student doesn't feel like a piece of the
They just won't
the
flourish.
community. They don't. And so they'll push back or they'll hide their emotions until they feel safe. Schools have to make it feel safe. Teachers have to make them feel safe. Otherwise, it's just going to continue. And I think we need more staff in there to be there for those students, because you can only do so much as one person. However, it does take sometimes just one person to make that change. For me as well, when I was young in 4th grade, we didn't talk about that at all. I had a learning disability, but I didn't know. We didn't diagnose that. I had a 4th grade teacher who basically just was that person.
Yeah, that's
So-
wonderful. So educators, and we hear this a lot of educators are reaching out to us, and we provide mental health education in schools. One area of focus is resiliency, so coping and being able to identify the symptoms is so important, and we can teach children or youth to do that, right? So, because you have the academics and you have so many responsibilities as an educator. So, and we can do that with parents as well, right?
You did that for us last year, as a matter of fact.
Oh, right, we
We
did that,
partnered
yes.
for our parents towards the end of the year to teach them a little bit about what we were teaching the kids, about their brain and behavior and how it all has a purpose and what we can do. And the parents were pretty receptive to it.
Do you see a lot of stigma within the school system? So with students, I should add.
So that's
Between
one of
students.
the beautiful things is that my kids come to me and they have no shame. They are more than willing to share everything and anything with me. Where it comes into the stigma is coming from the parents. So when I'm talking to parents about whether it be treatment or the idea of medication or the idea of seeing an outside person, that's where the stigma comes into play. So while the student doesn't have that, they are getting the effects of it because they're not able to get the help that they need.
Well, this is interesting because I did a presentation this morning about mental health in the workplace, and we said it comes from the top down, right?
Yep.
So in the school system, it comes from the teacher, right?
Yes.
That would be top down. But at home, it can come from the parent. And so my generation of parent, which is, well, I'm a little older, but we talk about mental health at home, and so my children are open with me if they're struggling, whether it be with anxiety or struggling. So you have a very good point, and I don't know if you were able, if you shared mental health,
So
Talk to
Jenna's
Jenna.
a little older because she graduated in 2013. So even at that point, it was not discussed and stuff like it is now. Her turning point came in 2018 when she won her first title with the Miss America organization, because that gave her a voice. And that's when she started going out, and that's what really turned her recovery around, because she started realizing the effects that she had on other people, and that she could teach these other people.
well, she started the conversation, and
Right.
she kept that conversation going, right?
And so it
So-
just was a big,
Yeah.
like that was opened the door, so to speak, for her. Because she was not, she was at Millersville, and that was after you took the semester off, yes. Yeah, she took a semester off because she couldn't cope while she was there. And so she took the whole semester off, went back that fall, and then in 2018 is when she was a senior, second semester of her senior year.
Super senior.
Well,
Yeah.
super senior.
Yeah.
Well, when we return from our break, we'll hear more about Jenna and her story
Yeah.
and what we could be doing in schools.
Okay.
So welcome back to Mental Health Now. Before our break, we were talking about your openness and your transparency to your students, and then in turn, they're opening up to you. And Maria, you have the same experience
Yes,
too.
yes.
You're very inviting. So when we talk about, the needs within the schools, how can we spread that awareness and education and reduce the stigma?
I think the biggest thing is having that staff in the schools. Unfortunately, there is just not enough staff to support our students' needs. According to the American School Counselors Association, there should be one counselor for every 250 students. And you will be hard pressed to find that being actually valued. And so not only having school counselors, but having enough social workers, having enough school-based counseling coming in, and just having those supports in place are the biggest things.
And I remember when I was younger, they did have counselors actually counsel students, and that is not the case anymore.
No.
Would you agree?
Yes, we contract with an outside agency to do school-based counseling within the school setting, and that list is very large. So, the counselor is given a time frame to meet with the students, and I do feel they do the best they could with that time. But again, there's just so many on that list to be seen
Right.
that can you really get to the root for that child is the big issue. So that's, again, if we had more, we would probably be a little better off.
As an elementary school counselor, we see kids on more what would be called solution-focused therapy. So working on with them for like a couple weeks at a time, but not the long therapy that most of these students are needing. So we're there to help with like the little things, but we do have school-based counseling, which actually was my first experience with counseling in high school. So, yeah.
So the other day I was speaking about, there are many providers, and when we talk about a provider shortage, there are a lot of providers, and we can get folks connected to providers. One of the areas that we're really struggling with is that more intensive therapeutic support. And so that early intervention and prevention is so key with students. So you talk about you as a school counselor in elementary school, but coping and resiliency and managing some of the stressors and some of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So good coping skills, coping effectively, those are not being taught. And is that something that we could be?
I think actually the shift is happening.
Great.
So I know for our district, something new we've done, I've been there, this will be my third year. So it started off well, we didn't have many resources. Like you said, the counselor would meet when they could, maybe a small group. But now we have agencies coming in, but we also made a flex period where the homerooms get to stay and they work 3 days a week on a social emotional skill. And the other 2 days
wonderful.
are when they can catch up on any work missing, because it's not our just special needs students that are struggling, who are identified.
And that's for
yeah.
all students,
All
or is that
students.
just learning support?
All
That's remarkable.
So that's good. We've
That's great,
also,
yeah.
this year, for the next school year, our counselor, and it'll be, again, a tricky job because she's already a counselor, but she will be doing 2 days a week teaching 4 periods a day, a social emotional curriculum.
Like the special rotation.
Yes, exactly. So again, it's a great idea, but here we are taking another staff, pulling her. So we just need more people.
And
Yeah.
that brings me to the question, during the pandemic, and I shared this with our own staff, is the educators and the school staff was struggling as much as the students were, although we weren't giving them the, respect that they needed to get that mental health support. Are you still seeing that, or do you?
I mean, I see teachers that are at their wits' end. They don't know how much more what else they can do to support the students, and that's affecting their mental health. I mean, I see on social media, on TikTok especially, teachers and school counselors quitting because they don't have the support from higher up. Like you said, it's a trickle-down effect.
Right.
So without having that support, they can't do their job.
Right.
I think our district is trying, and again, every administration is different. We also partner with Wellness Works, a program here in Lancaster, I believe they're based. And they go into schools and they do meditation and calming, and this is great practice. They'll come in, but they're only there for like a season, so I might have them in winter and somebody else gets them in spring. So again, it would be great if we had continued that for the entire time, but at least they get practice on being still, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and the staff get to practice that too, and they do offer it to parents. The problem is with our population, I don't know about yours, I have parents that work 2 jobs. They can't get them to services, or they can't get to the workshops. And I would love to see, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Paper Tigers at all. It's a documentary about the Lincoln High
Trauma.
School. Yes. I think, like, if we could think big picture, I know they're an alternative school, but imagine if our districts had a health campus right on campus. They go there for their treatment. They go there for their medicine. They can't even get to doctors sometimes, or they don't have one. That's like where we need to think. We need to think big picture, not just kind of putting Band-Aids on things.
Right.
But I know
I've
they're
seen
trying.
That. I've seen
Yeah.
that with mental health. It's we put Band-Aids on issues, and we've done it for so long, and the reason is because of the lack of funding, and we can
Funding,
talk about that in
time,
a whole
staff,
other right.
yeah.
So, but the important thing to remember is that we're talking about it now, and mental health is number one. Identified as the number one health issue in the in the community reports across the country, actually.
I was just thinking too, are you familiar with the ACEs?
Yes.
The adverse child. So I try as often as I can, if I'm in an IEP meeting, a parent meeting, kind of talk to them about, let's look at the child's past and let's understand their story. And very often the parent will then go into their story, which you see that's where the trauma is stemming,
Right.
generational. And then I build that trust with them, but I kind of also say, behavior has a reason, let's work together. Parents need to be heard, and I feel like a lot of them come in and think schools are going to point the finger. What are you doing? Your kid's not listening. And that already makes a wall up for them.
Well, Maria, we started a family peer support program, and family peer partnership is what we call it, and Shelby Whitmer is our peer specialist, and she really is supporting the parent as they struggle. So she's helping them navigate the behavioral health system, and she's helping support them while they're navigating it together. She walks
Yes.
alongside them, and I think that's key. Very good point.
They need to not feel alone.
Exactly, because it's not something that people think. Attribute, if your child's struggling, they think you're a bad parent.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
on you, the shame.
Exactly.
And
So
in reality, the school staff knows that that's not the case. So for any of the parents out there listening to this, we know that that's not necessarily the case, and we just want the best for your child. We are on the same page as you. We are here to support you and your child.
So to that point, I think it's important for parents to feel comfortable reaching out. And you just invited them to reach out. And I think that's so important. You're starting the conversation and not judging. And that's what the kindness and the ACEs and the trauma-informed work that's happening all over Lancaster County is speaking to that. So understanding the story and addressing it with compassion.
Yes.
So how does, going back, Jenna, to your story, if a parent, so you entered college and your journey continued,
Yes.
Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, so I went to Millersville. I graduated in 2018, and throughout my time there, my mental health had a lot of ups and downs. Specifically, my sophomore year, I was ready to drop out of college because I was so lost. I decided that my degree that I'd spent 2 years pursuing was not what I wanted to do. I was having issues with relationships, friendships, all that same stuff, and dealing with suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. And while Millersville was great at having enough staff there, I was still dealing with the action of having to go. So I was diagnosed last October with ADHD. And so part of that comes with not having the motivation or like physically being able to do the steps that you need to do. So going to therapy and taking care of my mental health just kind of fell to the back burner. And so luckily I was able to take that semester off, really focus on myself, and come back ready to finish out my last few semesters of college. And then I was able to decide to pursue my master's degree to be a school counselor.
So here you are as a school counselor helping others. And as a parent, it's a very frightening experience to have your child have suicidal ideation. How does a parent know when to seek a professional?
Well, so with her, it was a little different because when this was a lot of this was happening, she was away at school.
So you were not
So
aware, still.
where I found out about it is I got a bill in the mail for an ambulance where
Surprise.
they had taken her
Wow.
to the hospital.
Wow. So
And
that's
so then that
interesting.
opened the door then we
Right.
started,
Right.
like you need to go back to doing what you were doing. And there was some other struggles and stuff going on financially at home and things like that. And we're like, you know what, just take the semester off. Get yourself back together. And being at home, she also made the decision to commute, that she had that comfort of being at home. And so she made the decision to commute, and she did commute her last 2 years. And, she was 100% better because she could, she had that safe zone.
Right. So staying in that safe zone, being able to identify when you're struggling and need to create change. And also, Jenna, you're a good example of hope and what you can do. And so I thank you all for being here today and sharing this very important message about mental health and students.
Thank you so much for
Thanks.
having
Nice,
us.
yes, thanks. Nice to meet you.
You
ladies.
too.
Thank you. Let's keep the conversation going.